Hi, this is Chris Haigh, and this is the Fiddle Channel, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Michael Doucet. Hello, Michael.
Hey Chris, how you doing way over there?
Good, thank you. Yes. Now, for people who don't know anything about Cajun music, can you tell us a little bit about what it is?
Well, it's what we call Cajun music now is French music from Southwest Louisiana. It's called Cajun because it's a corruption of Acadian. It was a French people who sort of established a new foothold in the New World back in the early 1600s. And where they stayed, it was called Acadia. So they were called Acadians or Acadian. And then it became Nova Scotia after the English, your people took over. And then they were deported. The majority, but actually about 1,200 of them were deported. And a lot of them found their way here to this godforsaken land they called Louisiana, which is rather big mosquitoes and bigger alligators and snakes. They kept their music by singing ballads and singing the fiddle tunes. They were known to be fiddle players from over there. So they developed a fiddle style. They called it was much like Scottish fiddle music like from the Shetland Islands at that time of the world, where they had one fiddle who would play the bass or the baritone or the rhythmic structure, and the other fiddler or violinist, however you want, would play the melody. So you'd almost have a band together. So they were known to play twin fiddles. Much of the style that was recorded through the late 1700s through the 1800s. Then the German accordion made its way here. Nobody quite how. There's a lot of different theories. So it was loud. So the fiddle became, when they first started recording, because they wanted to sell Victrolas, the fiddle became sort of a secondary instrument so that it accompanied the accordion and it might have the same melody, but the rhythms were the same. But at the same time, they had incredible pioneers like Denis McGee and Sady Courville, who recorded back then in 1929, who continued to play that old style of playing twin fiddles, and that sort of lost, favor in the late in the 30s, etc. But Denis kept on playing, so you had that, and you had what happens to what we call Cajun music or Louisiana French music. We never called this Cajun music growing up, by the way. And anyway, so the music continues to resolve. It takes more American roots, takes more blues roots, popular roots. Then you had this song that was recorded by Joe Falcon in 1928 called "Ma Blonde et Partir," "My Blonde Left," and you have Luderin Darbone, who kind of made it a fiddle tune in 1936, and then Harry Schultz, who made it a really sort of a southern or almost a national hit in 1945. So the music, it continues to evolve.
Hmm.
What I learned I learned most of my music from one fiddle or two fiddle players that I just go visit. My uncle played fiddle
So,
and
can I
different
just interrupt you?
instruments. And
When you were, let's
yeah,
say, 15 or 16, did you see this music as being deeply boring, or were you already fascinated by it?
yeah, that's a loaded question. I played music. I was born in 1951, and I thought I was Roy Rogers and Elvis Presley.
Yeah,
So my first gig was banjo and playing Elvis Presley songs.
right.
Needless to say, that didn't go
Hmm.
for me. And so my uncle who played, he was the kind of uncle who had a racetrack, quarter horse racetracks here. It's not oval; it's just a quarter of a mile down for quarter horses. They're smaller.
Hmm.
Anyway, he was the guy that my parents told me not to hang around with. So of course I hung around,
Hmm.
and they had a lot of relatives, so I could never take his violin down out of the house. But he showed me the rudiments, and he showed me three songs that I remember. It's like Allons, Lafayette, which is one of the first Cajun songs recorded, Jolie Blonde, which is very popular, waltz,
Hmm.
and St. Louis Blues, but he never told me the name. So I always thought that was some kind of Cajun blues. And there were the other fiddlers around here that played with was Lionel Leleux and Doc Guidry, or in Guidry, who ended up, moving. So there was definitely influenced by fiddle players around here. Now, the boring part was that my father had 5 sisters and 3 of them sang. So they would sing these ancient ballads. And of course, we had to learn. We just learned them because we had to. That was boring,
Mm.
but that taught me French. And when I first I played in France with my cousin in 1974. They were having their folk revival. There was a festival called the Festival de Saint Laurent. It's close to Nancy.
Mm.
And people my age were singing the same ballads. So
Mm.
that really turned me around. I mean, I didn't think that this music was so put down here, even in
Yeah.
Louisiana, not
Mm.
among Cajuns, but anybody else. And so I was just so surprised that that had continued. So that's where I really got into this music and started, even the boring stuff, I
Mm.
started to learn.
How did you come to choose a career as a musician?
It chose me.
Yeah.
I didn't choose a career. Um, I always played music, and I love music, and not just Cajun music, any kind of music. I love play guitar. And anyway, um, and this is a true story. So I was at LSU my freshman year back in 1969, and there was like an easy A course called Anglo-Saxon folk songs. I said, well, easy course, let's go. So the professor was there, Dr. George Foss, Foss. He and Roger Abrams wrote this book called Anglo-Saxon Folk Songs. So the class was surrounded around this book. They said, well, we'll learn English ballads, child ballads, field hollers, blues, Native American songs. And this is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Mm.
And so, of course, I raised my hand. I said, well, what about French music, like, 50 miles away? I said,
Mm.
oh, no, that's just translated English songs. Oh, really? And so I went from that class directly to the archives, and I found a 1939 thesis in the LSU library by Irene Whitfield. And it gave the whole gamut. She's the one who kind of led Alan and John Lomax when they did their early recordings in Southwest Louisiana, just field recordings, nothing commercial, in 1933, 34. And she was still alive. So she and I became really good friends. So for me, I looked at it in an academic sense. And that was the first time I had it. Like, nobody really knew where these songs came from, who did it. So I got this grant, and I did a lot of, research on these musicians, on these fiddler players, and kind of wrote a semi-thesis and sent it to the Library of Congress. And so it just happened at that time. People were putting down this music as we were secondary citizens. They weren't listening to this music because we called it old people's music.
Mm.
Only old people play this. And when we started playing this thing, it was like totally anomalous. And, where are these young people? They thought we were from like Mars or something, playing this stuff and speaking French, because French, had been surpassed by, the Anglophiles here because of the oil business. And from the oil business, you have a lot of Texans and you have a lot of Oklahomians. Pretty much, we can call safely rednecks who didn't understand our culture, nevertheless. So there was definitely a lack of pride as a whole, but there were individuals who never stopped playing this music. And those people those are people who I kind of attached myself to. Marc Savoy was 11 years older than I was, and he was kind of the focal point of that. And, from the old world to new world. So I was mostly interested in the old songs. And luckily enough, man, like Denis McGee and Sady Courville, who were born in the late 1800s, were still alive. And it was like, you just knock on the door and you play music. I mean, I quit recording Denis in the late 70s, with a cassette or sometimes reel to reel. And I had like 154 songs. There's no way I'm going to even learn that. And of course, the minute I don't bring my tape recorder, he comes up with another song.
Mm.
So, but the point is to bring him out. So there were people like that. That's why I was really interested in the fact that we played music. We were just young people playing.
Yeah.
And I think people were hungry. We had a band. It was called the Cajun Grateful Dead. It was called Coteau, Coteau. And we did a record much later, but anyway. And it brought a lot of young people there and brought old people there because we were really taking the music, the roots of the music, and just, this is how we play them now. And it started this thing going. but it was not just me. There was a lot of people. I was one of the few musicians. There were people who were writing. There were poets, etc. And really, what happened is just a fluke. We were just a young band, and we lucked out. We played the festival in France, and we were in France in '76. And this guy came up to us on a boat. He said, do you have a record? And I said, no. He said, would you like to make a record? And I said, we just a bunch of this little town in Louisiana. It was like it really gained momentum, and then and anyway, we played a lot in France, a lot in Canada, etc. And here in the States, and it wasn't like you'd make any money with it. We just loved to play. And I guess it got to be by 1986. I was teaching at a university and doing a radio show and doing a lot of video work. Anyway, it was too much. You'd go out and you play and you wouldn't have any time off. So I asked the group to try to do this for a living, and we give it sabbatical. Let's give it half a year. Let's give it 6 months or so. And that's what happened. It just took off. And so my idea was that I wanted to play every state in the United States. It was fun playing in Paris and fun playing, in France. I mean, they understood, but in the States where this music this is North American music. And so it was very important to me to get this across, which was like very difficult because, a lot of times, why don't you sing in English? I said, well, if I sang in English, I wouldn't be here, and so it began gathering things like that and a lot of other things, the food and the movies, but that's basically why. So it was just by default. We were in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. So how did Cajun music first get into the general field of American music, as opposed to just being, playing to yourselves?
I think probably because of WSM radio station. I think a lot of Cajun musicians went to Nashville. That was the way out of here. It's like you go to Nashville, like Papa Cairo or Jimmy C. Newman or Doug Kershaw was there for a while, but Kershaw is nuts, and he's like he got kicked off really quick. But nevertheless, that it entered, American genre when they did the first Newport Folk Festival.
Yeah,
Kershaw was there, and also was Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash, and he had all of them play together. Johnny Cash he had Kershaw on his first TV show, I believe, and the great Mark Savoy, when he was learning how to play, he heard Kershaw, and that changed his life. He still tells me that. I said,
yeah.
Because the thing about Doug, he can really play. I mean, he there's an act, but he can play. And I think, and just the way he plays, he gives it all. And I think that really said, this is our genre. And I think that's how it got into it. Because like I said, there was a hit like Jolie Blonde by Harry Schultz in '45. And Pop Moon Mulligan, you hear a little bit Texas swing. They would play Cajun music, destroy the language, but nevertheless, they would play some songs. So slowly but surely, Bruce Springsteen recorded Jolie Blonde. I guess you know that. So who knows about that? That's it's like there's not one direct link. But I say if there was any magnet, I'd say it would be Nashville and Grand Ole Opry.
Can you tell us how the fiddle style is influenced by the accordion?
Well, unfortunately, yes.
I wasn't going to say that.
With the accordion, like I said, it was a secondary. So you were sort of you took a back seat. You would play, and the accordion can only play in one key. If it's in C, they can play in F and maybe G, and that's it. And the fiddle, you can play minor keys, and you do anything you want. So that changed, and the style of playing. And as you well know, being a fiddle player, there's certain keys that work really well, certain keys that don't. And if you have accordion in E flat, you're going to have a lot of fun. Not really. And so that was a different style. So that became a shuffle style, which you hear when you hear like commercial fiddle playing. That's where that comes from. And then you hear like a McGee style, which had never played with accordion, or the guy I was talking about, Philip Almo. It's more lucid, it's more airy. So and the accordion style, the accordion would play it, and play along. You play the chords, then you sort of play a melody, and that was it. So it was a very short area that they played. It wasn't like playing a fiddle song and develop the fiddle tunes and doing more improvs, which most fiddle players played. if they played alone at their house, but they probably never recorded that.
So would you say that
so it changed the style a lot.
Yeah, so the Cajun shuffle is in a way a reaction to the fact that you had to take a back seat.
Pretty much, I would say, yeah, definitely.
That's interesting.
And it created a different style.
Yeah, and I believe a lot of Cajun fiddlers have to tune down as well. They tune down to C rather than D.
That's because of the accordion.
Yeah.
So if you're playing, you want your open notes, you drone, because most of the Cajun music is droned, droned. So you play that. So if somebody was playing a D accordion, you play standard. If somebody would tune up and you'd have to play a 4-hour gig, and there were you'd have, because you'd be playing, your fingers would fall off.
Yeah.
There are fiddle players and like Lionel Leleux that never tuned down, that played standard. So there's still examples of that all along the way. It's just what kind of sound style you want, But I mean, there's nothing better for me than twin fiddles. Even if you're twin fiddles and playing with accordion, you could still get a different sound. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the many things that I'm interested in is what I call traditional intonation, which is where fiddle players used to play in between the cracks. And I would say that's probably something that has had to disappear from Cajun fiddle because of the accordion.
Yeah, you still have your slides and things. You still have your bluesy influence. See,
but to me that's slightly different. With the old intonation, you actually pitched directly and went straight to the note that was like in between. Yeah. Which of course the accordion can't do.
What about that? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have like Denis McGee. You didn't know he wasn't worried about a pitch or a key. Yeah. He just played the sounds.
Yeah.
That are kind of wild. Yeah. So in the accordions, you're right. Accordion kind of straighten it out. Let's put it that way. Yeah. That's true. Much to my chagrin.
Do you think you could demonstrate the Cajun shuffle?
Like if I was playing with accordion, it might be like this.
Yeah, that's great. So it looks to me like the sliding is an important part of the shuffle.
Kind of thing. That's the shuffle. That's the Cajun shuffle.
Yeah, and how common is it for Cajun fiddlers to sing at the same time as playing?
It's like, if there's no other singer, you're going to sing.
Yeah.
It's like Harry Schultz probably was one of the first. Luderin sang. Denis sang. I think a lot of fiddlers play.
Could you just demonstrate what happens with the fiddle and the chin when you're singing? Does your head go up and down, or does the fiddle go up and down?
No idea. Let's play it. I do Paul. It's a song by Denis McGee called Pas Janvier. Oh, pas janvier dans les mains polies. Non, mais tu connais, c'est la seule que moi j'aimerais. So either you keep it here or the old days they would do that, but that's too much for me. It's too much work for me, so I just keep it up there.
So you're not really putting it up and down. It's it's in the same place all the time. It seems to me.
Yeah, it just I have a chin rest, so it's just where it's comfortable because you want to play because you're playing the music at the same time. So whenever you play in harmony or singing, it's just a natural thing. I never think about that.
I've noticed watching your videos that you bring in a lot of other influences. You don't just play pure Cajun music.
Well, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as pure Cajun music. There is no such thing.
If you look at bluegrass or you look at Irish traditional, for example, there is an army of musicians and fans who they're like the police. They're like the jazz police or the bluegrass police. And if you divert one little bit from the pure 1945 what style, whatever, then you're a traitor. But you obviously don't feel that.
Well, those people I give a hand grenade without a pin. Because bluegrass is different because it's mostly Bill Monroe. It was the Stanley Brothers too, so it was one guy.
Yeah.
In our music, everybody had a style. Yeah. It's not one style. Everybody, what's the first style? I mean, I love Kershaw's Bow Form. I think it's the best ever. A lot of people don't think he can play. So everybody's got their opinions. But everyone that I met, including Denis McGee, just played what they felt. And that became their style. So, I mean, I played Denis McGee music. This is music that was pretty lost from the 30s till the late 60s.
Yeah.
When I met him. And people, and I'm not going to say who, but popular Cajun musicians would come to me, why are you wasting your time learning that old music?
Yeah.
Because they would play different. They would play more modern styles, So it's all conjecture. I mean, the thing is you have to look at the whole thing. Cajun music, basically from its early roots, from the 20s to now, has changed, continues to change. Yes, there is a certain thing, the way we bow and the way we play, and the sound we make, that should be the same. There is not just one way. This is a Cajun, a cone. There's not just one way to play it, but there's only one way to play it right. So it's like, that's what it is.
About 25 years ago, Ken Smith came to England with D.L. Bernard. And I saw Ken Smith playing, and I was amazed by the way he played, because he played like Mark O'Connor. And I couldn't equate the two things. How can he be a Cajun and yet he plays like Marc O'Connor? And I think I now realize that he probably went into fiddle contests, and that's how and why he came to play like Marc O'Connor.
Just looking at where you live, Ken's a great fiddle player. He lives in Kinder, which is towards the west, so he learned a lot of Texas fiddling, and he was really into. He's a great fiddle player, and is contest fiddles is his thing. Yeah. And when Cajun was getting popular, he could play anything. I mean, he can play anything. Yeah. And when he played with DL, it was so good because he got to really, it was wide open. It was a guitar player, a accordion player, and him. So he really got to express himself. And so it's just where you come from. You bring what you know. That's it. And that's it. So he's a Cajun fiddle player too.
What would you say is the best way for someone outside of Louisiana to learn Cajun music?
Oh, simple. Just listen.
Yeah.
And I think if somebody's going to study this, pick somebody you like. I mean, the Balfa Brothers are probably the easiest to figure out. Then you have Austin Pete, and you have Denis, and then you have Doc Guidry. You have all these people. I would pick one fiddle player, whoever that may be. And if you like it, then you learn as much as you can from that person.
And do you teach yourself online?
No.
No.
Somebody has to knock on my door 5,000 times, and maybe I'll let them in.
Yeah.
Because they'll have a whole, it'd be the whole Buddhist lesson before we even touch the fiddle.
Right. What's your latest album? Have you got something that you've just released, or?
Yeah, it's our last Beausoleil record was called From Bamako to Karen Crow on the Compass label. And when we did that record, the head of the company, Gary West, wanted me to do a solo record. He wanted me to go to Nashville. How boring. I said, and he said, because I understand what he wanted. He wanted like a really good, band behind me. And I said, Gary, there's no offense, but we have better musicians here.
I've read some of your publicity, and Garrison Keillor said that your band was the best Cajun band in the world. Now, when people say stuff like that, do you feel a crushing responsibility towards your music, or is it to hell with it? I just do what I want.
I mean, it's like that's somebody's opinion,
Yeah.
not mine. You know, it's like I appreciate it. Yeah, it looks good in print. Might
Yeah.
that's a gig.
What did Cajun people think of Jambalaya and the fact that that's such a successful song? Did people resent it, or did they think this is wonderful?
No, that's a really good question. Nobody has ever asked me that. Jambalaya comes from this traditional Cajun song, Grand Texas. Basically, I mean, it's like a basically. Hank Williams always played. I think he played. There was a Cajun fiddler he played with, and he was friends with Moon Mulligan and another guy. What is his name? And they kind of put the song together when they were in. He loved Louisiana. I mean, and why not? So for the most part, yeah, everybody was very proud of that because all of a sudden, somebody like Hank Williams, who's one of the greatest writers, musicians, you know, to come out of that, looked at this little culture in Southwest Louisiana who had fiddle players playing in Nashville at the same time and respected that. And he loved it here, from what I can understand.
Well, that's great. Can you give us one more song before we finish?
No, sure. Let me do a Denis McGee song.
Yeah.
For real. He calls it Vas Calais.
Fantastic. Michael Doucet, thank you so much.
But anyway, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. See you again sometime.
I'll see you on the video.
Yeah. Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.